In today's video, I'm diving into the hidden signs of gaslighting in relationships. You ready? Let's do it. Hey friends, welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Tamie M. Joyce. I'm an empowerment life coach helping you reclaim your power after narcissistic abuse. Please take a second to say hello and introduce yourself in the comments section below. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell so you never miss a new video. So let's talk about the hidden signs of gaslighting in relationships. Now, to begin with, how we spot the hidden signs of gaslighting is we first start by understanding what the hell it is and the very real effect it's having on us if we allow it. Now, typical gaslighting techniques include things like denying something when there's proof, projecting your own attitudes and behaviors onto others, as well as telling blatant lies. And it's important to note that gaslighting is about more than just lying and manipulation. In essence, it's all about using lying and manipulation to gain control over someone in an emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually destructive way. And there's no denying that behaving in such a way is abusive. Whether it be by lying outright or lying by omission, distorting, twisting, manipulating, minimizing, or denying, doing so in an attempt to cast yourself in a more favorable light, rewrite history to suit yourself, protect your false persona, and cover up the very real relationship crimes you've committed, no matter how it shows up in the relationship, there is absolutely no denying that gaslighting is nothing less than a cruel and psychologically abusive act. Do not ever let anyone try to tell you otherwise. Attempting to skirt accountability and responsibility by lying to or about someone, worse yet, attempting to confuse and cause that someone to doubt and question themselves, their memory, their perception of reality, or their sanity even, is some pretty sick stuff. And narcissists do this for sport, even to children, unfortunately. So make no mistake, gaslighting is a severe form of psychological mistreatment that, if allowed to persist, can drive the target to ask whether the things they've experienced are actually valid, real, or true. And although the gaslighter, the person doing the lying, minimizing, and denying, can certainly take full advantage of this vulnerable state of mind by providing their target with false information for no other reason than to be perceived better and escape accountability for any wrongdoings on their part, if successful, the gaslighter then has full control over their target, convincing them, as well as others, to believe whatever narrative the gaslighter wants them to believe. And this, of course, only magnifies the problem because often others tend to fall for and believe the gaslighter's narrative. For example, when everyone is repeatedly told that something's wrong with the target, this can create some serious doubt in the target's mind, as well as everyone else's. Furthermore, when the gaslighter succeeds in getting friends and family members on their side, this only fuels the fire. And it will often be difficult and complicated, if not downright impossible, to reverse the distorted narrative and set the record straight. Narcissistic gaslighters are typically quite relentless in their campaign to demean, devalue, and discredit their chosen target. And sadly, the net result can often be the shaking of the target's mental and emotional health. Again, if the gaslighting is allowed to continue. On the other hand, when the gaslighter, in other words, the lying, toxic manipulator, finds themselves up against someone who's onto their game and who isn't so easy to manipulate, dominate, deceive, or control, they simply double down on their efforts to demonize and vilify their target to anyone who will listen, not least of which their enabling little entourage. And the more pushback they receive from the person who sees right through them and isn't having it, the more they'll claim to be the innocent victim, having no idea what the issue is. The issue, of course, that they themselves have caused, created, and perpetuated. But they'll claim to have no ever-loving idea what that issue could possibly be. And while claiming innocence, they'll also work to assassinate the character of the person pushing back. And the folks buying the bullshit are either very easily duped and manipulated themselves, are just plain dumb, or they choose to believe what they know deep down is fully an upside down and extremely distorted narrative. Why? because it serves them on some level to do so. That's right. Know who you're dealing with, friends. People often believe what they want to believe for reasons that have absolutely nothing to do with us. And it could be as simple as maybe they don't like the target either. Maybe they see the target as a threat somehow. Maybe the target is a tad too strong, empowered, awake and aware, or courageous even, has a tendency to speak their mind, call a spade, or maybe the target carries a little too much inner strength, light, love, and truth, just enough to trigger all the insecurities and inadequacies of their own in addition to that of the narcissistic gaslighter. It could be as simple as maybe the target is succeeding in life in a way that they themselves haven't been able to. It could be any number of things. But the point is, there's something about the target that triggers the enablers. So, rather than be decent human beings and aligned with truth and reality, they hop on the bandwagon with the narcissist and run the distorted narrative too, being the weak little minions that they are. And if you want to learn more about narcissistic enabling, you can watch this video here. Now, as we know, abuse comes in many forms. Being yelled at, bullied, hit, threatened, or perpetually criticized, scolded, humiliated, and rebuked are classic examples, and certainly the more obvious forms of emotional violence. The problem is, more often than not, these forms of emotional and psychological abuse are relatively easy to spot. Gaslighting, on the other hand, can be much more subtle and therefore not always so easy to spot and see for what it is. In addition, in many cases, the target is actually beat down and disempowered as opposed to standing in their power, and therefore is often so overwhelmed by the perpetrator's dominating and controlling attitudes and behavior, along with the feelings of self-doubt that arise as a result of exposure to this form of abuse, that it may take a long time to realize what's happening and ultimately seek the necessary help and support needed to properly heal and recover. Gaslighting abuse is intensely psychological, with deliberate intent to generate confusion and doubt in the mind of the target, as well as I alluded to before, a means of avoiding accountability and responsibility. And what we have to remember when we're dealing with people with a destructive narcissist personality pattern is we're dealing with people who have no problem lying, none whatsoever. In fact, they are often excellent liars, having had so much practice, of course. And this type of individual will be willing to say whatever it takes to cast themselves in a positive light while discrediting and vilifying their chosen target. And here's what's true about the consequences of long-term exposure to gaslighting if we don't get wise to the nonsense and do what we need to do to take care of ourselves in the face of gaslighting abuse. It's often our misplaced trust in the person doing the gaslighting, whoever that might be, that causes us to question ourselves. And the longer we've been gaslit, the more that will mean questioning and second-guessing ourselves on every little thing. For example, we often apologize to them for our craziness, the very craziness brought on by the gaslighting itself. As a result, our self-esteem takes a big hit and we lose our sense of self, our personal identity, and our connection to our authentic core. So this is your first clue when it comes to spotting the hidden signs of gaslighting in relationships. Is there a person or group of people whom you feel crazy, or more accurately, destabilized around? There's a reason for that. Pay attention to how you feel when in their presence as compared to in their absence. This is important because if we stay in the ring long enough with these folks, we may even find ourselves on the verge of losing our sanity. Because the harsh reality is, situations, circumstances, and relationship dynamics where gaslighting is pervasive ultimately have an enormous detrimental effect on our beliefs, the beliefs we hold about ourselves and reality, as well as tanking any sense of self-worth and self-esteem that we might otherwise have had. And this is why being introduced to the concept of gaslighting and other similar forms of emotional and psychological abuse can be so validating, especially for anyone who's been in the dark most of, if not their whole lives. Once educated, you'll start to see what's actually happening in your relationships, why things haven't been adding up, and what you've really been living and experiencing. In other words, how you've been mistreated, manipulated, exploited, and abused. It's like someone coming in and turning on the lights in a very dark room. Painful as it may be, you may realize the extent to which you've allowed yourself to be conned, how much denial you've been living in your whole life as a consequence of being handed all manner of lies and dirty little secrets to carry, either consciously or subconsciously. Eventually, you may decide it's time to stand up, speak the truth, sever the ties, and leave the relationships altogether. But it can take some time and some serious healing and recovery work to get back to some degree of mental and emotional stability and balance. Gaslighting is not just a one-time event or temporary, but it continues indefinitely until a light is shone on the situation and the truth of what you've been living. In fact, the more it occurs, the worse the effects become over time. There's a real cumulative effect to these issues. The more it happens and the longer it's allowed to go on, the less self-esteem the target has and the more controlling the perpetrator becomes. Classic hallmarks of this insidious form of mental and emotional abuse are deception and concealment, which is precisely how gaslighting is enabled and allowed to continue. People who gaslight do so for their own benefit and with zero remorse for the very real effect their abuse has on the target. For example, undermining the life, identity, reputation, or worse, the self-worth and perception of reality of the one being gaslit. And sometimes this is allowed to go on for decades. Often, the abuse will start out with vicious gossip, which can escalate rapidly. The more the gaslighter succeeds in gathering the troops, so to speak, in other words, the more recruits to his or her cause of diminishing, demeaning, devaluing, and discrediting the target, the more the gaslighter feels a distorted sense of his or her power, dominance, and control. They literally get high off this shit. And they'll flex this false sense of power and superiority as often as they can, but selectively so, of course, so they don't accidentally expose themselves to onlookers for the toxic manipulators and outright liars they actually are. In addition, there will be regular efforts to convince everyone that the target is bad, wrong, psychologically unstable, and altogether delusional or a rager, when in reality, their own behavior provokes the rage or emotional instability they then criticize their target for expressing. Now comment below and let me know whether or not you're starting to recognize the hidden signs of gaslighting in your relationships. Let me know in the comment section below. And if you'd like to learn more about the possibility of working with me in my 8-week transformational coaching program, The Freedom Class, there is a link in the description below where you can apply to see if you qualify for a free one-on-one consultation with either myself or a member of my team. Gaslighting can happen in numerous ways, but in hindsight, it's easy to see that it can sometimes be passed off as nothing or no big deal, since the actions are often so subtle. Now that said, inevitably it will be the not so subtle actions that give it away. According to the most up-to-date research, gaslighting can occur in any relationship. However, in most cases, the gaslighters are relatively close to their victims, which is the exact reason why it can be so powerful, regardless of whether it's a friendship, romantic, family, or professional relationship. It's also a very common strategy used by abusive family members, spouses, intimate partners, destructive narcissists, pedophiles, and individuals who attempt to manage and control large groups of people, like cult leaders. It can also be used by so-called well-intended but ever so ignorant, naive, and absolutely dysfunctional onlookers, friends, and family members. In such cases, it can sound like this. That never happened. You're exaggerating. You're just too sensitive. Just get over it already. Let it go. It's in the past. When, actually, the pain and trauma are not only very real, but very much part of our present, as long as it's left unresolved and the gaslighting is allowed to go on. There are consequences to living your life steeped like a tea bag in denial, deception, manipulation, and outright lies. It's an inverted reality created by the gaslighter to serve their own end or cover their own ass. So do not underestimate the very real effects of long-term gaslighting. Just ask any survivor of childhood sexual abuse what it's like to be handed such a colossal and sick secret to carry at such a young age. Ask them what it's like to be manipulated into silence and complicity, often by the very people who were supposed to protect them and keep them safe. Then ask them what it was like if they one day found the strength and courage to stand up and speak their truth. Then ask them what the cost to them, their lives, their emotional and psychological, as well as their spiritual well-being was, before, during, and after speaking their truth. Believe it or not, more often than not, it's the gaslighting, the lies, the secrecy, the manipulation that without question do more damage than the initial molestation and abuse. And in case you haven't noticed, governments, world leaders, and the bought and paid for mainstream media are gaslighting the public on such a grand scale that most people have no idea they've been fully and completely brainwashed, manipulated, absolutely duped. True story. And the longer that's allowed to continue, the more painful the collective healing process is going to be. Mark my words. Now, when it comes to the hidden signs of gaslighting, the bottom line is this. The results, the effects, are often devastating. Although at first blush, gaslighting emotional abuse appears to be a difficult technique and seems highly sophisticated, it's actually and sadly become the norm. An ordinary happening in our everyday relationships, as if denying another's truth and experience is normal. Of course, a classic example is the husband who tells his wife she's imagining things to cover up in an affair. The boss who denies in public ever having said the thing he or she absolutely said in private. It may even be the doctor, therapist, sponsor, or coach who changes their story from one visit to the next, telling the target that they never said that. These are common instances of gaslighting in action in real life. And this mental manipulation, especially if it has an emotional attachment to it, is veiled, subtle, and operates on deep emotional and energetic levels. Know that. These manipulations produce a deep sense of anxiety and can also cause the target to go through life walking on eggshells, feeling the need to be hypervigilant, constantly over-explaining and defending themselves. And again, if allowed to continue, slowly but surely the gaslighting abuse will annihilate the target's sense of self-worth and pummel their self-esteem into the dirt. In the beginning, the target simply feels confused as they realize something's not quite right. They may even attempt to speak to the gaslighting abuser about what they've discovered and how they feel about it. But when dealing with a destructive narcissist, this isn't going to work, and instead will only serve to invite more gaslighting, along with other forms of abuse and attack. The gaslighting abuser, master manipulator that they are, will disprove the target's discoveries, invalidate their feelings, and work to convince the target that they're wrong and the abuser is right. Although this may seem insignificant at first, with consistency over time, the target gradually loses confidence and begins to seriously doubt what he or she thinks and feels, as well as the truth of their own experience. The effects of this mental and emotional manipulation and abuse snowball from there. The trick is to notice the signs of it happening and then muster the strength and courage to do something about it immediately if possible. Nip it in the bud right away. And this could be by calling it out for what it is, by saying something like, "Please don't gaslight me. I know what I heard. I know what I live. Invalidating me, my feelings, or my perception of reality isn't okay. In fact, it's a deal breaker for me. Got it?" Then silence, not another word. Alternatively, you may decide to see it for what it is, say nothing at all, and simply walk away or leave the relationship altogether, knowing full well you won't be heard no matter what you say. This is the reality when we're dealing with empathy-impaired emotional manipulators who feel entitled to lie to and about us, discounting and discrediting us in this fashion. Sometimes you're better off just saving your breath and your vital life force energy. In other situations, you may decide it's worthwhile sitting down with the individual and having a hard conversation. Either way, it's vital that you make a decision to trust yourself and back yourself. Again, you know what you live. You also have to be willing to tell yourself the dirt honest truth about what's going on. If someone is willing to mess with you in this way, A, they are not a safe person, period. And B, the likelihood they are going to change is slim to none. So don't lie to yourself about that. Tell yourself the truth about what you see, hear, and feel. Always. Whatever you do, be sure to get the support and help you need to heal from the ordeal so you can rebuild your self-confidence and self-esteem and move forward with your life without all the extra nonsense and insanity. The bottom line is, it's important to be able to know the signs and indications so you can see clearly when someone is trying to gaslight you. Understanding the conventional techniques employed and what effects gaslighting can have on the person being gaslit is the first vital step to putting a full stop end to this form of emotional, psychological, and spiritual abuse. Most importantly, you want to know how you can deal with current or the impact of past gaslighting situations, heal from them, and regain your lost sense of identity and self-worth. Take your power back. Draw a line in the sand. Choose yourself and say no more. Then back yourself entirely, whatever it takes. Remember, gaslighting is fundamentally about invalidating and controlling you, your perception of reality, and the truth of your experience, what you know you've lived. And you don't have to put up with any of it. And with that, I'm going to call it a wrap. But before I go, how can Tamie M Coaching help you? 4 ways. Number 1, subscribe to my channel and click that notification bell to make sure you get my new video every Friday. Number 2, watch my free web class by clicking on the link in the description below. You'll learn about my personal journey and professional experience through decades of research specific to healing and recovery from codependency and narcissistic abuse. You'll also learn about some powerful strategies that you can begin to use today. Number 3, if you're not sure where to start, but you want to come and learn from my team and I, and you'd like to be supported by a stellar community of like-minded people who are focused on solutions that actually work, you can learn about my 8-week transformational coaching program, the Freedom Class, by going to TamieMCoaching.com and clicking on programs and reviews for all the details. And number 4, if you want some help right now because you've got a burning issue, you need something solved, you want to break free from painful relationship patterns permanently and actually make lasting progress in your healing and recovery, go to TamieMCoaching.com and click on Apply Now to learn how you can become a client.